Well, hey there. So today I wanted to talk a little bit about sedum because sedum is such an amazing garden plant. There's so many varieties and so many different types, and they solve a whole lot of gardening problems for me, and I know a lot of my students that love them too. So I wanted to talk a little bit about how to get more sedum out of the sedum you have, so how to divide sedum and how to propagate sedum cuttings and how you would actually do that process. And I'm going to show you when you know, or how you would know that it's time to actually divide the sedum, so that you have an idea of what it looks like when it's healthy and what it looks like when it's starting to get a little funky looking, and what the signs are that you may need to divide. And usually mine don't even get to that point because I'm dividing them while they still look good, because I just love to spread them throughout my garden. But I do have a couple here that are in need of division, so I'll show you exactly what they look like and the difference between a good one and one that's sort of nearing its end. And so I want to go over a few different varieties. I have Sedum Angelina, which is a beautiful, beautiful variety. I also have, it's a ground cover, so that one's a little bit different. I also have Sedum Dazzleberry, which is a burgundy foliage plant with bright red raspberry blooms in like late summer. And then I also have Sedum Autumn Joy, which I think a lot of you are probably already familiar with, and how you would handle that. And I also have Sedum Autumn Charm, which is sort of a variation. It's really similar to Autumn Joy, but it's a beautiful plant and it's in bloom right now, so I want to show you that one as well. So just know that the Dazzleberry, the Autumn Joy, and the Autumn Charm, they're pretty much, all three of those are handled in the same way. And then if you have a particular sedum that you're looking to spread or split or propagate, that's a ground cover, they can all be handled the same way that I'm going to be doing the Sedum Angelina today. So let's get to it, and I'll start showing you around my garden. My name is Amy, if you're not familiar. I'm from prettypurpledoor.com, and I help home gardeners create landscapes that are uniquely you. And one of the biggest issues that I see a lot of home gardeners have is how to fill their gardens. Because let's get real here, it can get really expensive to have a beautiful full garden, and it also takes a lot of patience, because gardening will teach you that, and it may take several years for your garden to fill in to the point where you're really happy with it. So propagating plants, taking cuttings, these are skills that you can use on tons of different plants, not just sedum. You use it on hostas, daylilies, coral bells, all different kinds of plants. There's ways to usually split them, propagate them in some way. So this is like a secret trick. It's not secret, but it's more of like an intermediate, I think, intermediate skill that once you start gardening and you start realizing how expensive it is to buy all these different plants, that you're going to want to learn how to do this and how to take these plants and make the most out of your money. So let's take a look first at this Sedum Dazzleberry. It's like the coolest plant. I'm just going to move and kind of turn you this way. This right here is my Dazzleberry sedum, and what you'll notice is the center of this plant is sort of opening up, and I hope that you can see it on the video. It's hard for me to tell if you can see it, but once you start to see this like dead center area where it's sort of open and flopping, that's typically a sign that it's ready to be split into multiple plants. So a lot of times this will happen too if you have a heavy rain. So if you just had a heavy rain and it sort of droops like this, it'll come back. But once it gets to this point where it's too heavy, you see how heavy it is, that it's just sort of flopping outward, that's when you know that it's ready to be split. Here I have two varieties of sedum. This is Autumn Joy, which I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with. It's a very popular, and for good reason. It's a beautiful plant. And this one here is called Sedum Autumn Charm. And it's sort of like the stepsister, the ugly stepsister of Autumn Joy, I feel like, but I just love this plant. It's got so much going for it. Really similar to Autumn Joy, but it's got these like blush, sort of faded pink blush color blooms. And it's also got a variegation in the foliage where it's got this buttery yellow rim around each leaf and then the green in the center. So it's actually even a little bit more interesting than Autumn Joy in my opinion, but it's not quite as vibrant as this Autumn Joy is. So you can see these two plants, these are perfect. You could actually take cuttings, you could split even this small one, you could take cuttings and split this larger one. But these two are examples of perfectly healthy plants that don't need, quote unquote, need to be split right now. But now let's go and I'll show you one that actually does need splitting and what the difference is. Okay, so here you'll see my Sedum Autumn Joy here in my front bed, and you'll see the giant center here, how it's totally open in the middle. This one is dying to be split. So as you can see here, this is totally flopping. It's not straight up anymore. It's so heavy that it's sort of tipping outward. So that's how you know. If you have something like this, the plant isn't dying, there's nothing wrong with the plant, it's just an opportunity for you to divide it. So usually I'll take this whole thing out and then I'll get like a little clump of it and replant it in the same place, and then I take the other cuttings or the other divisions and I move them around the garden a little bit. Here we have Sedum Angelina, and this is a low growing ground cover, and I really love this plant because it stays this way all year. It turns like a little orangey brown in the late fall and into winter, but it still covers the ground. It's great for like weed blocking in a garden, and a lot of people think ground cover aggressive spreading. It does spread, but it's not aggressive at all. And actually you can just kind of take chunks of it and just pull it, like literally pull it out right with your hand. So if it's getting a little too close to another one of your plants, you can just do that and super easily just take care of it. A lot of people also think that when they put a ground cover in the ground that it's going to spread and fill an entire bed with this plant. And while that might happen over the course of like a decade, a lot of times these plants need help. So if you have a large concentration of the sedum in one area, but it's not reaching 10 feet that way or 5 feet that way, you can actually take little chunks, little divisions of this, and take those clumps and sort of dot them around. And usually I'll take, I don't know, a softball sized clump and plant it and then sort of space those out, and then within the year they usually spread and they're all touching each other. Sedum Angelina, all you need to do is get a sharp tool, a little garden knife, or even a shovel or something like that, and you can literally just cut out a cork of it. So just very carefully go and make yourself a little square or circle. And then you're just going to take your shovel and pull up from underneath. And as long as you were able to separate that from everything around it, you'll get a nice hunk like this. I'm just going to put some of this soil back. So I'm leaving a tiny hole in my ground cover here, but this will fill in, push this around so that it fills that hole and you won't even see the hole. And then you'll have a piece like this, and you can even take this and divide it further into two hunks, and you just plant these. So you can see right here I have sort of an open space that's just mulch, so I'm going to brush the mulch off, and then I'm just going to dig a tiny little space here. I'm going to stick this in the hole. See how this one sort of disintegrated on me, right? So there's no soil around it. That's okay. You can actually still use this. You just dig a hole, same thing, and just sort of stick the root part where you see these roots, just stick it in the ground right there, and then fill in with the soil around it. And this will grow. I've literally pulled like little pieces off and just shoved them in the ground in random spots and they grow. It is so easy to divide. this particular variety of sedum. You won't have any problem. So buy a little tiny thing of Sedum Angelina for $5 at the garden center. You fill your whole garden with it and you don't have to worry about weeds anymore. Beautiful plant. It even has blooms in the summer. They're yellow. They're not super showy or anything, but they shoot up over top of this. And you'll have a beautiful garden, ground cover that fills in and doesn't choke out your plants. Next, we're up to this Dazzleberry, and it's the same process that we just did for the Sedum Angelina, except it's more of like a perennial. So you kind of have to, you could even use like a real shovel for this. My garden, it rained this week, so it's not very hard to dig right now. And I didn't even go all the way around the plant, but look at that, it's just popping up for me. So I'm taking this entire hunk. Look at this monster. You can see in the center how I was saying how the center was sort of bare. So I'm gonna take this and I'm gonna divide it into pieces and then sort of disperse it throughout my garden. But while I'm here, I'm actually going to take a piece and then put it back in because I really like it in this spot. So I'm just gonna take my garden shovel and just push down. You gotta use your muscles here. And you're literally gonna chop it. Don't worry about hurting it. It'll be okay. Okay, so was able to kind of split that into a separate hunk here. So I'm just gonna grab this bunch and I'm literally gonna take this entire root area and right where it was planted, I'm gonna stick it right back in so that next year this will be in the same spot. It'll look beautiful. I love how it looks here next to this blue star juniper. The contrast is awesome. So that's all you have to do. And then you could take the rest and do whatever you'd like with them. So this would work for the Autumn Joy and the Autumn Charm as well. The same exact process, just get under it, dig it up, pull a chunk back off and stick it back in the hole where it was, and then take the rest of them and you can divide them. So I'm not gonna do that with the others right now on the camera, but I am gonna show you how to take just a cutting from one of those. Okay, so here we are right next to this Autumn Joy, and I'm just gonna show you how you could take cuttings. You could take cuttings from the piece that you've dug out and just clip, clip, clip off of the one that's already dug out, but you don't even have to. Like, I've literally just popped a piece of this off and stuck it in the ground somewhere and it's grown. So very simple to do. You want to do this when the sedum is actively growing. So it doesn't have to be blooming, but it has to be actively growing. And you're just going to find a nice piece that you like and find a leaf node area where the leaves are touching the stem. And you want to clip a little bit below that with your shears. Hopefully you can see this. Can you see it? Let me see if I can bend these down first before I do it. So right here, I'm going to clip. Okay. So you see how I did that. And then all you want to do is go up a little bit. We're going to pull these leaves off that are on the bottom. Just start pulling them right off. And then here we are on the second set of leaves. And we can clip a little bit above that second set, just like so. So we have, this is the bottom and this is the top. And what I do is I usually clip these leaves, because when you have a cutting like this, you don't want too much energy going towards growing these leaves. So if you cut them and you make them smaller, more energy will go into growing roots on this tiny little cutting. So that's pretty much how you do it. And I have this other piece here, so I'm going to do the same thing and just sort of cut right above these leaves here. Cut the top right off. And you strip these bottom ones. And then I'm just going to clip around, and there's another cutting, right? So now let's go to my little test garden, my holding area garden, and I'll show you how to put these in the ground. I'm back over at this little test area. I have this like a holding area for when I buy plants and I'm not quite ready to put them in the ground yet. I store them in here so I don't have to live in those ugly, terrible plastic pots anymore. I just feel so sad for them when they have to live in there. But this is where I'm going to put these cuttings that I just took. So here I have my 2 cuttings. So your cuttings. And then you'll need rooting powder, and this is what I'm using. But you don't necessarily need it. It just kind of helps the plant to establish roots. If you don't have rooting powder, don't let it like hold you back from trying. And I just have a little skewer, or like a wooden skewer. You could use a dibble or just a stick or something to make a hole. So what you're going to do is just make sure that you know the top from the bottom of the plant, because if you plant it upside down, clearly that's not going to work. So I have my rooting powder here. Just stick this here for now. So what you want to do is pull some of this mulch away first. And then you're going to put your stick in and make a little hole to put your cutting into. And the reason that I do this is because once I put the rooting powder onto the cutting, I don't want to shove it into the ground and then lose all of the powder. So I stick it in the powder, just like that. And then I put it right into that hole that I just made, and then just sort of tuck it in. Stick it right in there. Just going to do it again here. Make a hole. And then I'm going to take this guy, stick him in the powder, shake off the excess, and then I'm going to put him in, and I'm going to tuck him right in. You don't have to plant these too deep. I kind of almost planted them a bit too deep, but I'm going to push this down, the soil down a little bit. So you can do this with like hundreds of cuttings. So let me just here's my Dazzleberry. I have my Dazzleberry here too. So I'm going to cut right below a node, and then I'm going to go up, and I'm going to cut maybe right, you can make them longer, right there maybe. So here's my cutting. Pull off the bottom few, strip this baby, and then just leave a little bit on the top, just like so. And we're going to clip these down. And make a row back here for Dazzleberry. And these can go really close together because I'm going to transplant them into the yard afterwards. I'm not going to leave them in here to grow forever. So when you're just kind of taking cuttings, you can plant them really close to each other. It's not a big deal. And just assume that some of them are going to die, that you're not going to get 100% success rate, and you'll be totally fine. Okay, well, now we're back to Dazzleberry here, and I'm just going to, again, take this. Oh, jeez, I almost lost him. Just going to take this Dazzleberry, and you just sort of naturally try to find the spaces. So you can you see that? How this almost is the center here? Then you just take a sharp tool, and you got to push down. You're cutting basically right through roots. So it is a little violent, this process, but it's totally fine. The plant's going to be okay. Don't worry. Promise. If I'm doing it, it's okay to do it. So you can I could even cut this into another bunch that's even smaller, but I think I'm going to leave that as it is. And then I have this one here as well. And then all of these pieces that sort of fell off, I'm just going to leave them here so that I can take cuttings from these as well and see if I can get these to transplant. Another question that you might have is how to actually tell if your cutting has taken. So the easiest way to tell, in my opinion, is I did this one probably 6 weeks or so ago, so this isn't going to happen overnight. But what you can do is just slightly tug a little tiny bit, and if you feel resistance, which this one does have, you'll know that it is rooting. So I'm actually going to dig it up just so I can kind of show you what it will look like. I'm going to sacrifice this plant for you guys, and you'll see here that it did develop roots on the bottom. So that's how you'll tell. I mean, you don't want to pull it up like I just did, let it go, but all you have to do is basically tug and hope that it will come up. So that's literally all there is to taking cuttings, making divisions of Sedum Angelina, Sedum Autumn Joy, Sedum Autumn Charm, Sedum Dazzleberry, any other sedum. If it's a tall upright one, do it the way that I did the Dazzleberry, the Autumn Joy, the Autumn Charm. If it's ground cover, do it the way that I did the Sedum Angelina. If you liked this video, you're definitely going to want to check out how I divide daylilies. I'll put a link to a couple other videos that you'll probably like to watch as well. So I'll see you in that next video. See you over there.